Hello and welcome to our weekly IG Live. Today we are going to be talking to Marla from White Girl Learning, and I'm excited to talk with her about how she is working to use her privilege to amplify Black voices, to BIPOC voices. So it's very exciting to get to talk with her about, there she is, about her journey and any advice that she might have literature, because you can learn so much through books.
Hi.
And there she is. Hi. So good to talk with you. And I should mention, you have been such a good friend to Makeaway Media, helping us out with support and book reviews. So we are very happy to have you on here.
I am
Thank you for
so happy
joining
to
us.
be here. Thank you.
Well, why don't we just go ahead and start with you introducing yourself and your channel, which is White Girl Learning.
Yeah. My real name in real life is Marla Taviano, and I am in Columbia, South Carolina, where I have lived for 3 years now. And before that, I spent 39 years in Ohio and then lived in Cambodia for 5 years. I am a fairly new single mom of four young adults, and I write and edit for a living. My day job is a lot of writing and editing for other people. I also write my own books, but so far that doesn't pay the bills. So that's the dream. And then my labor of love is my White Girl Learning account, where I read and review books that are exclusively by Black, Indigenous, and other authors of color.
And so just to follow up, you said you write your own books. What kind of books do you write?
Well, I had four books published in 2006, 7, 8, and 9. And I tell people that I don't want them to read those books. I was a pretty conservative Christian at the time, and I wrote about marriage and motherhood and stuff like that. And since then, my faith and my ideas and beliefs have evolved. So I no longer hold to those. Most of them went out of print, so that was good. I then wrote a bunch of ebooks while I lived in Cambodia. And then just my two most recent books, which are the ones that I do want people to read, are actually poetry. And they are about my faith shifting journey. So, Unbelieve is the first one. Unbelieve, Poems on the Journey to Becoming a Heretic. And then the one that just released a few months ago is called Jaded, a poetic reckoning with white evangelical Christian indoctrination. So very much a story of, and White Girl Learning is a part of that, because a lot of what changed my heart and mind was starting to read authors who were more diverse. I have been reading since I was 4 years old. And when I started really intentionally looking at what authors I was reading quite a few years ago, they were almost all white authors. So that my shifting faith and the White Girl Learning journey have gone hand in hand. So it's been a huge part of my life.
Well, can you tell us more about that journey, and especially White Girl Learning? What was the impetus to start that? I think you've been
Mm-hmm.
doing it for, is it about 5 years? And also when you were talking about how you first intentionally looked at the authors you read, because I'm sure there are many people who are in that situation, but they don't take the time to look at it. Maybe they don't even really think about it. So what prompted you to even take that look? Because that's such a big step that you have to take first. You have to take stock before you can make any changes. So what brought that about?
Well, in 2000, let's see, I want to say 2008, 2009, I helped, my family and I helped a Black friend of ours start a new church. And it was a multi-ethnic church. And he's a Black man and had this dream of having a church where different people would come together, since Sunday morning is like the most segregated hour of the week. And so they invited us to be a part of that, and we were. And so I was making a lot of new friends who weren't white. I'd had friends who weren't white, but not a lot. I come from a really small town that is very white. Went to a college that was pretty white. I did my student teaching in Okinawa, Japan, and that was kind of my first exposure to me being the person, me being the minority. And so we helped with this church. I made new friends. And then it was 2012 that one of my new friends, who is Black, put on Facebook, why are none of my white friends talking about Trayvon Martin? And I didn't know who she was talking about. I didn't know anything about this. I Googled Trayvon. I find out what has happened. And then I start finding out more. And it was hard to explain, but I know a lot of people have had this same feeling. And even a lot of my Black friends who grew up in white areas or went to white schools had this kind of awakening at different points. But for a lot of people, it was when Trayvon was killed. And starting to wake up to the fact that there is police brutality, mass incarceration, that the justice system is not actually just, and all of these different things. And since I read so much, I wanted to start reading more about these things. So I started reading, and that's kind of when I realized, oh, I really haven't been reading Black authors. I would have known about this if I had been. And that's when I then checked my shelves and realized. So for a while there, it was not only white authors, it was white conservative Christian authors. So I have gone from white conservative Christian authors to just, I don't even necessarily call myself a Christian these days. I mean, I hold to a lot of the values, many I don't, that I'm seeing in a lot of Christians in the US. So that was kind of the journey. And then I was, like I said, we were in Cambodia from 2015 to 2020 and doing humanitarian work. And I was still keeping in touch with all of my friends and family back in the States. And I remember a friend had posted a book on Instagram, and she kind of put some things around it and made it look like this like color coordinated photo. And then I looked in her feed and she had all books. And I was like, wait a minute, what is this? Because my Instagram feed was like just my kids, things we were doing in Cambodia. And so I learned about Bookstagram. And then I thought, oh, I could share these new authors that I'm reading, my new diverse bookshelves. I could share them because that's always been something I've loved to do, is to read, to talk about the books. And so on December 1st, 2017 was my first post for White Girl Learning. And the name came from Jacqueline Woodson, who is a Black queer author who I love. And she has a book called Brown Girl Dreaming. So that's kind of where I got the idea for that. And then from there, I think I was doing 3 books a week for a while. And it was harder to get books in Cambodia. But then when we visited the States in the summer of 2018, I brought back a ton, and I had a lot of books on my Kindle. And then a bookstore opened that did have some books in English. And then we moved back to the States in 2020. And now you can see behind me, it's like, I just stocked up and collected all the books that I didn't have for 5 years while I was in Cambodia. But yeah, it has absolutely changed my whole entire life. I mean, not just the things I've learned and unlearned, but the people that I have met, the authors that I've connected with, other book lovers, a lot of white people who wanted to learn things but didn't know where to start. And since I was already kind of on that journey, I could help them. And I love the fact that it's a space where people only come if they want to learn. Whereas when I started this anti-racism journey, I would just put everything on Facebook. I would just start saying all this stuff. People would get angry at me. There'd be fights. And that's a little bit different than, hey, I'm going to share these books and these authors. If you want to learn about them, if you want to find some new books, join me. If not, go somewhere else. And I've really had very little controversy, maybe a few things, but for the most part, it's been just really peaceful and joyful. And I'm an author and I've been writing forever, but I can never find the words that explain like how much this just bubbles up inside of me and overflows into everything that I do. It's just really, besides my kids, it's one of the best things that I've ever been a part of in my life.
Well, just want to take a moment to share some of the comments because I know you've been,
Okay.
that's my job is I'll watch out for the comments as you're reading. You've got one really nice one saying, appreciate the honesty, which I think as white people is really key when we're going through this journey is you have to, the honesty and the sincerity. And I think that really comes through. And we have
Hi,
Dee
Dee
Dee who's on here saying, I love this journey. Thank you for caring. Thank you for waking up and thank you for all that you do. And I'm very happy to hear that it has been that the reaction you've gotten has been so positive. But I was wondering about that if you've gotten a lot of negative reactions. So I'm glad to hear that you hadn't. And you talked about how you get a lot of questions or you get approached by white people who want to kind of go on the same journey and they're not sure where to start. So how do you get them started? Are there particular books that you recommend or a way of going about it? And especially I think that like you said, people don't know where to start. I also feel like there are a lot of people who are afraid to do the wrong thing and that kind of holds them back. They get paralyzed because they don't want to offend anybody and then they don't do anything, which of course is not helpful. So what advice do you give people?
I have not figured out yet how a perfect journey for someone to start from point A to point B to point C. I usually try to find a little bit out about the person first. What my experience is, if someone's coming to me as kind of a conservative white evangelical Christian, that's all they know, that's a little easier for me because I can then bridge that gap and say, well, here is this Black author who's also a Christian, but will teach you all these things that you might not have learned in your white church. Some people know quite a bit already. Some people are just really starting from zero. Some people don't love to read. Like it's hard for them to read a lot. And that's not, I mean, I've never had that problem because it's my favorite thing to do. So you can just follow Black, Indigenous, other people of color on social media. Everyone I follow for my White Girl Learning account is Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, mostly creatives, but you can look down there and find a bunch of people to follow. And I also tell people, like, Black people are not a monolith, Indigenous people are not a monolith. There's not this standard thing, like learn this and then everything's fine. And I think people too are looking for shortcuts, which there are some shortcuts. You don't have to take as long as I took to wake up to everything. And honestly, we don't have that kind of time anymore. Like we didn't really have it back then either, but it's really urgent now. And I know when George Floyd was murdered and white people were coming out of the woodwork, like, what can I read? What can I learn? What can I do? And a lot of them just got really overwhelmed and then kind of quit and gave up. And that anti-racism journey lasted like 3 months or even less. So I encourage people to do what you can to find out little bits at a time, but you've got to be serious and you've got to be committed to this. Like for me, there were 40 years went by before I learned like the truth of history and all of that. That was a lot to catch up on. So when you have learned a whitewashed history, and especially if you live, like I live down in the South now, I'm from Ohio. People ask me, how can you live in the South? It's racist down there. I'm like, yes, so's Ohio. Like it's all different kinds of racism, but it's everywhere, all 50 states in this country. But just starting to be more aware of what you consume. What shows are you watching? Are all the characters white? What movies are you watching? Are you watching any documentaries? If you are, what are they about? What authors are you reading? And there are certain ones, like on my bookshelf, I could pull out some, like, so you want to talk about race is one, that kind of lays out things for people. But for me, it's this, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, which could be frustrating and intimidating and overwhelming, but actually it's kind of exciting to think that there's so much more out there for me to learn. But what I will say is the more you learn, the less scary it is that you're going to mess up because you know more. And for white people who live in very white areas, I have people ask me, how do I become friends with someone who's not white? Everyone around me is white. And I say, well, use this opportunity right now to become the kind of white person who would be safe for a Black person or another person of color to be friends with. The more you know, the more the language that you know, the history that you know, what's going on in present day, all of that, the more that you are aware of, that will make you ultimately a better friend to someone who's not white. So on the one hand, go slowly, but on the other hand, push yourself too, because people don't have the luxury of waiting for all of us white people to wake up slowly. And Martin Luther King Jr. in the Birmingham jail, I want to say 60 years ago, was saying that these white moderates were wanting to go too slow. Like they were saying, oh, well, let's not rush this. Let's take this easy. Well, we're still taking it easy, and in many cases moving backward all these years later. So it's really on us, and it's not on Black people and other people of color to educate us, except for us to buy their books that they worked really hard on and we pay money for, and then we can learn that way, but not to go in someone's DMs and say, hey, what can you tell me about racism? I think that's what happened a lot in 2020, especially. I know that a lot of my Black friends just got bombarded with, hey, help me out with this racism thing. And it's like, that's not how this works.
I want to say thank you, Elle Hoover, who's giving us a lot of great comments. First of all, amen, no monoliths. I'm glad you mentioned that. And also, she says, also, no one is expecting perfection, but a perfect effort is so important. And that's something, thank you for saying that, because that's something really important to keep in mind. And I also wanted to address, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. When you were talking about how, especially in 2020, although in other times it's happened too, that a lot of people were putting the burden on their Black friends or even strangers that they didn't know in their DMs, asking them, what do I do? How do I get started? And it seems to me like this is a role that as a white girl learning, that you're really kind of filling, like you talked about bridging the gap, that in some ways, you know, that can be a really important role that you play in this space, that you can kind of take on some of that burden and say, here, you know, let's not put all the burden on Black people. I can tell you what I've learned, and here are people, like you said, here are people to support, here are good books to buy, and so on. Do you find that that's something that, I mean, because you're really taking to heart this idea of using your privilege. And so I wonder if we could get into that a little bit more. What does that phrase mean to you, and how are you kind of putting it into practice on your channel?
Yeah, that means a lot to me, that the whole idea of using my privilege. I think about reparations and micro reparations a lot. Reparations meaning giving back to, in particular in this country, the conversation is giving back to Black people, African Americans who were descendants of enslaved people, and thinking about how much was stolen from them because their ancestors labored for so long for free and were owned and did not own themselves or any property or anything else. And then generational wealth was built by white people, but never by Black Americans. And how can I, with my limited resources, give back in a way? And so I think that each one of us, as a single mom, I don't have a lot of money to give, but I'm already reading books, and I can then share those books. And for me, because I am an author who would love for people to read my books and share, that's my way of, like the Christian thing from the Bible that says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Like what feels like love to me, when people read my books and share them. And that's the way that I can very naturally love other people, is read their books and share them. Each one of us cannot do everything. We can't all serve in the soup kitchen, or we can't all protest in the streets, or we can't all give a lot of money, or we can't all start nonprofits, or whatever it is. But each one of us, I think, is uniquely gifted. And this happens to be my gift and my passion. And I had no idea that it could have so many like rippling effects. Like I didn't have any, no idea about this. I'm just really, really grateful for that. And I forget what your initial question. Oh, just how do I use my privilege? Yeah, that's what I do, knowing that I can get a lot of people to follow me because they're interested in books, and then I can use that platform to amplify voices. My shirt, I don't know if you can read it, says "Amplify Black Literature," and that's the thing. We've heard it said like giving people a voice or something. They have a voice. They are saying things. It's how can we get it out there, especially in the world of publishing that has traditionally been so white. If we read books by Black, Indigenous, other authors of color, we buy these books, we share these books, and more people demand these books, then publishers are going to take notice and they are going to publish more books. It's happening, maybe not as quickly as we like, but it's definitely happening. And I like to think that I play a small part in that. Anyone else who's doing that, makeawaymedia, like that, all of us working together, we can change things. We can change things because we vote with our dollars, right? Like that's how companies, and especially publishing companies, that's how they make their decisions. They make their decisions by how much money is this going to mean for me. So for me to spend my money on these books, encourage other people to spend their money, get the word out, then that's something small that I can do. I will say it's been frustrating with the algorithm, trying to get, like, I could have a lot of followers, but maybe only a few people will see a book. I'm just going to keep plugging away, doing what I can. It's here. If people want to find it, they can. When people do ask me for resources, what I usually do is kind of get a little feel for what they're looking for, and then I'll just go back in my old posts and just tag them in a bunch of books that I think would be helpful for them. I really would like to get some kind of resource put together, like a free resource that I could just point people to. But I'm pretty overwhelmed with my day job and my my books, and with posting pretty much every day here.
Well, that's something maybe we can look forward to in the future. It's always good to have something, goals out there. And shared Dee Dee's comments. She just said she loves this whole process of unfolding and being open to learning, which I think is so important about your channel, is that you have this attitude of learning and an attitude of humility, which is so important. I also wanted to touch on an initiative you have that I think is really wonderful that most people don't really think about, which is about supporting authors who are not yet published, which I think you're probably uniquely positioned to appreciate because of being an author and working as an editor and so on. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that is, how people can donate, and why it's important?
Yes, this is really exciting for me to talk about. It's fairly new, back in February, so Black History Month. The way it started was my friend Naya Abernathy, who is a Black woman. She and I were going to get together and go to this writing conference in Atlanta where she lives. And I told her that I was going to ask people to donate money kind of as micro reparations for her part of the conference. And then it turned into, wait a minute, I've got a lot of Black writer friends. Like I have a lot of friends. Very many of them are writers, just because we have just connected and I subscribe to their Substack newsletters, and we met on Twitter or on Bookstagram. And I kind of just looked through my phone and started counting people, and there was a pretty clear 10 Black writer friends that I had. And I thought I could do, for Black History Month, I could do something really cool where I just asked people for money, and then I would divide it up among these 10 friends, because a couple of them have self-published a book, one has a book deal, but the rest are aspiring authors. And it's really hard to find the time to write a book, because you're not getting a single penny until this book is, well, sometimes if you get in advance, you could have it ahead of time, but most people are writing a book, putting all these hours and hours and hours into it and not seeing any money until months or years down the road. And that's a luxury if you have to support yourself. And I've done that. I've been through that. I'm still kind of doing that. So I knew that it'd be really a blessing to them if I could get some money. So I talked to Naya because I didn't want the money coming to me necessarily. I wanted to just highlight one author, like one writer at a time, and have people give. And then Naya, speaking of the algorithm, said, what if one week, like one writer gets a whole lot of attention and everything and a lot of money, and then the next week someone doesn't get as much? What if you put everybody together? So we decided to do that. And I just had people send it to my Venmo or my PayPal and put either just a black heart or say Black Writers Fund or a black heart with a little pen or whatever. And I decided to make what felt like a really big goal to me was $5,000. So $500 for each writer friend. And we got that in, I think, either a little under or a little over 1 week's time. And I was just so excited about it. And I gave them each that money, and they've done, some of them told me what they did with it. Some of them, I know they just paid some bills so that they could write. And so now the next step is to figure out, I know, like with tax laws and everything, I'm self-employed. I just finished my taxes this year, and it's next year things are changing. Like if you have more than $600 in Venmo of something, they're going to tax it. So I can't really have all the money coming just into my personal account that I then give out. So I'm actually talking to a couple friends who have started nonprofits to see if maybe we could turn it into something like that. And then it's a little bit overwhelming to me with everything else that I have going on, but it's also very obvious to me that there are people out there. It wasn't all white people that gave, but majority white people who are saying, this is really cool. This is important to me. I want to give back. I want to help these writers. I had one white woman who she's an author and has her own Patreon, and she usually collects money and everybody does a retreat or something she was telling me about. She gave me $500 and put it toward the Black Writers Fund that month instead of using it for whatever they usually do. So, I mean, people can still give right now. I have a couple, like, money will come in every once in a while, and I've just distributed it in different places. So that information is on my Instagram, but I haven't said much about it lately because I really do want to get it to where it could be like an actual place where people could go, and then I could report back like this is where the money went and all of that. But I was so encouraged. I felt so hopeful that people were really, really excited about that. And what a great way for us to help get more books by Black authors out in the world is to help the people who are actually writing them. And my friends were so excited. It was so much fun. I lost sleep over it because I was like so excited about it. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And hopefully it's going to turn into something even better.
That is so exciting. It is, I mean, it's such a creative way to support people. Like Dee Dee said, she said, wow, thank you for this initiative. I mean, it is really wonderful. So stay tuned. If you're not following Marla yet, White Girl Learning, please do so, and you can watch for announcements about that. And of course, we will help share that once it's up and running. But in the meantime, you should definitely follow her channel for a lot of really great recommendations. And thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. We're really big fans, so we appreciate you coming on the show.
It was so much fun. Bye-bye.
All right, bye everybody.